I've decided that I want to die.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I did a video on the Spyderco sprint runs a little while back, and I was a little bit sort of pessimistic, critical, complainy about them.
If first world problems were a person.
Someone probably fairly said in the comments though, hey, those Spyderco sprint runs that they kind of use to print money, they might use that money for the weird Spyderco small designer bizarro knives that you still see pouring out of the company. And having this one in hand, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe that's kind of fair enough. This is a strange Spyderco knife, probably the weirdest Spyderco I've had. It has an air of danger to it. It's a big, strange, I'll probably say self-defense oriented Spyderco. And as much as I shouldn't, I kind of like it.
You are losing more credibility than you did in your last artistic video.
Mom.
When did I really have credibility, Bricky?
You do, in the hentai body pillow fandom.
So, the Spyderco Tropen, on basic terms, is an S30V blade on a G10 handle with a compression lock and 3 opening mechanisms, a big upswept trailing point style blade with a little bit of jazz going on in the design. It's got the standard Spyderco spoon clip, and it costs $200 US or thereabouts. Let's look at it next to some other knives to get our bearings on the size of the thing.
Show to remember. Take over, start to boogie down. Make over, nothing's gonna take away my life. Was over when you started with that shoe that the black walking I'm getting names over.
It's a passion fruit. So as you can see, it's a pretty large blade, and when compared to, say, the Paramilitary 2, it's got a reasonably thick blade that has a fairly robust point. Kind of leads me towards thinking that if there is a spec for this knife, apart from just being for the collectors of the freaky deaky Spydercos, it's probably a self-defense main purpose knife with a large EDC as kind of a support purpose. Kind of how it seems to me. Of course, I've not done any training to, or have any expertise in defending myself with a knife. So for me, it's just going to be a large EDC / collector piece. Let's talk about how it actually works. So we'll start with the blade. Let's talk about this supposed safety issue first. I have got it in the title of the video, so let's get it out of the way. Alright, so this bag tagged to the cupboard depicts the pocket. So imagine it's this pocket here, the knife is in towards the seam. That's what's happening here. This is the seam, and this is the knife in the pocket. So the concern is that reaching in to get, say, my pen, right? I'm burrowing around in my pocket, and my pinky, or if I have a deeper pocket, the fat of my hand scrapes up against this exposed piece of blade. Trying to make it happen, if I try and find that blade with my pinky, I can do it. There is a small exposed area that if you really feel for it, you can find, and you probably could give yourself a little bit of a cut. So it's not something that I can discount and say is a crazy or an exaggerated thing that could never happen. It could definitely happen. But I don't think the consequence would be huge. I think it would be a minor graze at best. And I do think that you'd have to be a very sort of specific kind of reaching to be able to have that happen. I think, as I said, I have to sort of try and manufacture a circumstance when it happens. I think you're probably more likely to cut yourself when it accidentally Emerson wave opens, or it doesn't Emerson wave open all the way. So which can happen from time to time, like depending on if you get the knife out when you're kneeling down shooting a crap knife video, for example, you could only, get one of these guys out, and then you've kind of got a bit of a blade out that you didn't mean to have out. So that's probably a more likely way you're going to cut yourself. Whole knife kind of has a chaotic vibe to it, which is something that you're gonna either be able to deal with or not. As you can see, despite the knife having a slightly precarious opening mechanisms, a proper dickhead will always find a way to cut himself in even a more normal knife use environment. With regard to slipping down the flipper tab and landing on it, also possible but not probable. Possible but not probable. Slight bit of muscle memory will be needed to ensure that doesn't happen. Once the blade's moving at all, so even the slightest bit of blade out, it's no longer a problem. So it's not even from partial deployment. It's just going to be if you completely miss and slide really quickly down onto that blade. So that's how that would happen, that specific circumstance. Overall though, definitely worth considering, but not a fatal flaw, perhaps. So in my book, it's probably not the end of the world. It's probably nothing that's really going to bother you unless you're either very unlucky or sort of seek for it to happen. But you cannot discount it that the blade is in the compression lock path. And most unfortunately, really, it does stop the fun compression lock opening of these knives, which you can do with pretty much every other compression locking Spyderco, is then you hold the compression lock and you shake it open. You can't do it with this one because there's a blade in the way, so that's a bit of a bummer. But with regard to that, you've got 3 other opening mechanisms to get to that I'm sure will do you just fine. So talking about the blade, you've got a flat ground piece of S30V. S30V is a pretty industry standard mid-range powdered stainless steel. Cuts just fine, cuts for a decent long time for everyday carry. If you're just cutting paper and cardboard and string, it'll barely need sharpening. It's really good. If you start cutting things like, big, thick, fibrous cardboard, twisted sisal rope, it might dull a bit quicker than, say, your M4s, but it's a completely competent stainless steel. The flat grind of the blade, it's on a bit of a thicker blade, but the edge seems to be acute enough to be able to cut very well. It's got I think an aftermarket edge on it though from Jeff, who I traded for this. And with this edge, which seems to be at about 18 degrees or so, it does my vinyl tubing test really well, just fine, no issues with cutting the vinyl tubing, which is stuff that really doesn't like being cut. Has the other flat grind issues, like try and cut cheese with it or something with like a longer sort of area to cut through. You'll get things sticking to the side because other grinds like hollow grinds and even higher saber grinds, they have that sort of shoulder or concave to give a bit of space between the blade surface and the material being cut, so that sort of allows it usually to glide through sort of solid matter a bit quicker. But for cutting stuff that just requires a keen edge and pretty decent geometries, it's going to cut really well. It's got a pretty strong reinforced point. You can sort of see when you look at it next to the Spyderco Paramilitary, a fair bit more meat behind the point. So yes, probably a bit of a slashing and stabbing knife, if you like. Moving on to the opening mechanisms, you've got 3 here, all in this very busy little point of the knife. First and least impressively, you've got the opening hole mechanism. So they have cleared out a little bit of space here to use the opening hole. You can put your thumb in it and open it, and it works okay. It's a little bit cramped in there. It's a small opening hole. I wouldn't have worried about it if I was them. And we'll get to the ergonomic issue that causes later. One thing at a time. The next one is the flipper, which on this compression locking, I believe bronze washer driven knife is quite nice. It just goes out without really any effort at all. It's not sort of like super drop shutty. No, it is actually, yeah. Compression locks are great like that. Even with, you know, bronze phosphor, they do fine. I'll actually, you know what, I'll open this up. No, I think it's on bearings. That explains it. I'll open it up and confirm right now. So the flipper tab works quite nicely. It's a pointy flipper tab, and that is so you come from the north downwards and get a good solid open. I'm guessing to really try and steer you off, you know, raking down against that blade, but that still may happen. Luckily the blade, as I said, it's not a huge concern, but it could happen if you really vigorously missed and slid down. So do try and preload from the pointiest part of the flipper and you'll be fine. The Emerson Wave is the next feature, and it is no doubt the coolest feature. Milady. 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 Truly show that you are a master of the blade with the Emerson Wave. I am not the biggest fan of the Wave. I like to have my knife out in a two-stage process. I have never needed it out that fast. I like to get it out, think about opening it, and then opening it. Having it out straight away, I'm just not down with the muscle memory of that. And this is my only knife that has that feature at the moment. And so sometimes it almost catches you off guard. It's a bit disarming to be so armed. So I'm not the hugest fan of it, but it works well here. In fact, it works very well. You've got a huge portion of steel in there to grab your pocket seam and reef itself open. So it does really, really well. If that is your bag, baby. Handle-wise, let's talk. It's got polished G10, which is nicely done and nicely presented. It kind of looks like the Corian handle of a good kitchen knife. I like how it looks. In general, it feels pretty okay. Like, it's got that warmth of G10. The smoothness doesn't really matter because it's quite a styled and contoured handle, so it does really lock your hand in. That index finger indentation is so severe, it's not coming out of your hand once it's in your hand. So it's going to be fine in terms of grip and, you know, not losing grip. I find that this void they've put in this handle side here, though, to enable this hole opening, kind of makes a bit of a negative space that allows a little bit of extra movement, more movement than I would like. I think if this scale was level with this other scale and without this gap in it, it would sit a bit firmer in my hand and not move this way as much. And when it moves this way, I often get this flipper tab here sort of auguring against my index finger, which isn't the most comfortable thing when I'm doing a prolonged job. So just a bit of an ergonomic snafu there. Not the end of the world. I usually just use knives for short bursts rather than long tasks. I only really do the long tasks in videos to shoot footage and get ideas of ergonomic issues that will occur in long tasks. So there we go. Pocket clip is a smooth Spyderco spoon clip. It's fine. It leaves enough of the knife out for you to grab it to do your super cool Emerson Wave opening. And apart from that, there's little to be said. It's a competent clip. Nothing to write home about. Largely happy with it. $200. It's a lot of money, $200 US for a knife like this, especially given the materials. You notice with the Spydercos that there is a little bit of a premium with these sort of niche-y, designery style knives. I think these knives are made for either the people who the exact design is for, so in this case, you want a large self-defense knife that looks cool and can also do big EDC jobs, might be for you. And it's also for the Spyder collectors who just get every Spyderco, and you know, they don't really mind how much things cost either. So that's why these things cost the way they do. It's not ideal. Like, for a basic user knife, you're better off just getting a Spyderco Military or Paramilitary 2 if you want to shop Spyderco, or get a Cold Steel Recon 1 or something like that, or you know, those will all be cheaper than this. And some of them might even have better steels. The Paramilitary 2 and S110V is a better steel, and probably do your big jobs just as well as this one, without perhaps the supreme, you know, self-defense bent that you could argue this one's got. So yeah, price-wise, a little bit, you know, funny there, but again, for the people I think are going to buy this, they're probably not going to be too concerned. This isn't going to be a big seller. It's never going to become an evergreen. I'd be surprised if it's around by this time next year still being made. It is what it is. That's kind of Spyderco's seasonal fancy knife methodology, and yeah, I guess it's kind of cool. It makes them collectible. It makes people look back and say, hey, do you remember the Spyderco Jots thing? That was crazy, wasn't it? And it's just a part of Spyderco's business model, which, it's okay, I guess. I'm alright with it. At least they're new designs, they're not just sprint runs. But again, if it's the sprint runs that let the new designs and the niche designers come through and given the time to shine, hey, every now and then you get a Paul Alexander or a Marcin Swish who, does become an evergreen Spyderco designer. So who knows? Maybe Mr. Vogt will, maybe his next design will be a bit less jazzy. I doubt it though. Something about this makes me think that he might be a very jazzy man indeed. So, at any rate, my friends, hope you've enjoyed this look at this weird knife. It was definitely something that I needed at the moment though. It's a bizarro knife in a world of titanium frame lock flippers, and I kind of appreciate it for that. However, it is just a bit too bonkers for me to really recommend to everyone. See you in the next video, guys. Bye bye.
Hail Satan.